Hey listeners, it's time for another mind-bending episode of What the Perf podcast. This is your host Mrinal along with your co-host Nitesh.
Hello, listeners. Welcome back to another refreshing episode of What the Perf podcast.
We've been receiving really good responses and feedback from our listeners. Thanks for all the support and feedback. Let's get started with today's episode, Nitesh. What's in the news?
I have four news items this week. In the first news, Neoload 7.5 was unveiled last week. This new version includes enhanced integrations with popular APM tool Dynatrace. The two products now share test results data, which is viewable from either the Neoload or Dynatrace user interface. Its another feature is integration with popular functional test automation tool Tosca, which supports conversion of Tosca API functional tests into Neoload performance tests. And there are many other feature enhancements. In the second news item, SpaceX successfully launched its 10th set of Starlink internet satellites into orbit. Starlink is a broadband constellation that will provide satellite internet access to the masses across the globe, particularly in remote regions. SpaceX constellation of Starlink internet satellites aims to provide low latency, high speed broadband to customers who do not have access to internet connectivity. Third news is about compromise of data integrity at Intel. Hackers dumped a total of 20 GB Intel's confidential data online from partner and customer resource center. The information leaked appears to be breached from the Intel Resource and Design Center. This department hosts information of registered users who are mostly Intel customers and partners. In the last news item, White House announces expansion of the Clean Network to safeguard America's digital assets. The Clean Network is the program that the Trump's administration comprehensive approach to guarding citizens' privacy and companies' most sensitive information from aggressive intrusions by malign actors.
Yeah, I went through the press statement for this one, Nitesh. It's a very comprehensive coverage. It is divided into 5 headings. I think you should check this one out.
Sure, Manal. So that concludes the news sections for this week.
Thank you, Nitesh, for bringing us up to speed on the latest news in technology. Let's get started with this week's episode.
Sure. So, listeners, as promised, there is another interview that we have taken. We spoke with Ganesh Narasimhadevara. He is the Director of DevOps, Performance, and Platform Engineering at ZestMoney. We spoke about performance, DevOps, and a lot of other interesting stuff.
Yeah, lots of great insights from him. I hope our listeners will also enjoy this conversation with Ganesh. Let's begin. Welcome, Ganesh. Welcome to What the Puff podcast. I have my co host Nitesh with me. Would you like to give a short intro about yourself?
Sure. Hey, Mrunal. Hi, Nitesh. My name is Ganesh Narasimhadevara. I am currently working with ZestMoney. It's a super fast-growing fintech in Bangalore. I'm working here as a director of DevSecOps. I'm heading the DevOps, performance engineering, information security, and production support tracks here. I have around 13 years of experience across service-based and product-based companies. With around 10 plus years in performance testing and engineering, and that's one of the reasons why I'm talking to you guys today. I worked across all kind of domains, starting from pharma, banking, e-commerce, financial services, and a bunch of other domains. Right. So, I started my career with Wipro. Worked for around 5.5 years as on performance and scalability aspects of web and mobile applications, which actually included testing, monitoring, a bunch of other stuff. And then I moved to Sapient. Been I was there for around 5.5 years, and yeah, and then I was part of an amazing team. They call it Performance Shared Services team there, which works not just on performance testing, but also contributes quite a bit to the initiatives in cloud and DevOps teams. Yeah, and then got an opportunity to move to startup, which is ZestMoney, where I'm working now. And I just wanted to explore the domain, and so I'm here. And then I started leading DevOps teams and information security also here, along with performance engineering. Been 2 years, so yeah, I'm loving the experience so far.
So, one could say it's an exponential growth curve, right?
I would say yes.
from performance engineer, and you're moved. You're now a director. So it's an envious career. Anyone would be envy of your fast growth. So Nitesh, I worked with Ganesh in my previous two companies. I did not work closely with him in Wipro. Wipro was my first company. Same was Ganesh. And in Ganesh's second company, which is Sapient, it was my third company. So you could say Ganesh was my mentor, kind of a mentor. It's kind of coincidental that both of us ended into a startup after Sapient. Ganesh, do you think there was something with Sapient that led to us joining startups, or it's just?
I would say it's just the opportunities that we try to explore outside Sapient, right?
Mm.
So, working in service-based companies, you get into that redundant work culture where you continue to do the same thing again and again, right?
Mm.
And that's what makes you think about wanting to do something new. To be very honest, for me, that's it. It is that triggered my interest into, let us see what startup does, right? I had enough 10 years of experience in service-based companies,
Yeah.
so I really wanted to explore what's in the startup companies, and yeah, I somehow I'm liking it.
Great, great, Ganesh. How did you get into the performance engineering part?
It's actually a funny story behind it. I'm sure Mrinal already knows how things work in big service-based companies like Wipro.
Mm-hmm.
I landed in a job at Wipro from the campus selections that usually happens in colleges, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we have no idea what the track we'll be working with,
Yeah.
and had very little idea and awareness on what are the kind of tracks that these big companies deal with. It was all a random selection where a few of us were put into dev, few of them into QA, and for us, a job in a software company always meant development, right? You sit, write a Java code or a C sharp code or something like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And then people started talking about QA. We know that's like the next biggest team that any project will have right after the dev team, right? So we are kind of still okay with that because we were put into the QA bucket and we are still okay with that one. And the funniest thing is we were taught Mercury QTP. Do you guys remember QTP?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, yeah.
So that's used for automation, right? So that's the one that we were taught for a week's time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, okay, you guys belong to QA, so you are going to be deployed as QA engineers. So we're like, still okay, because Wipro's job in a big service-based company.
Yes.
Who's going to say no for that?
Yeah.
So and right after a week, we get another email saying that you're going to be in a performance track,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I had no idea what that is.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you're going to be in a performance track. You're traveling to Chennai, working for a big insurance client, one of big insurance clients for Wipro.
What year was it?
This was in 2007.
Mm-hmm.
This was in 2007, right? I went onto the first project, landed in my office in Chennai the very first day. The very first thing that I remember was my project lead coming and giving me a workstation with a load runner installed on it, and then just tells me that there are a bunch of scripts lying in this location. Just go ahead and then understand it. I
Yeah.
don't know what load runner is, and I don't know how the script works. What are the requests that I'm seeing? I'm seeing a lot of web requests, web submit data, web submit forms. I have no idea what that is. And I just asked him, what exactly is load runner? Can you help me? Right. And since then, all he spoke about was about the tool.
Yeah.
And and then I really had to start delivering scripts from that very next week for this big insurance client,
Mm-hmm.
right? And it was just scripting, no test execution, no monitoring. You create a script for a user flow that they give you and you finish it, hand it over to them. That's all. And this continued for almost 6 months. You really can't expect more than that when you're in the very initial stages of your career, right? So right after that, I got real curious about how the test execution is happening. What are the factors that are considered? All we do is, because we are part of the DL, we get a report saying that last night's test was a failure, and we had no idea why that is a failure, right? So I started speaking to the leads and then trying to understand, why are you considering this as a failure? And then I started getting into the execution. And since then, it's been like quite a bit of projects, right? And one thing that is really good with service-based companies is that you get to work in a lot of projects and use a wide range of tools,
Yeah.
right? That helped me a lot because I had to work across Silk Performer, Rational Performance Tester, JMeter,
Mm.
and right after working into all of this, like I mentioned, right, you get into a kind of doing redundant work, and you want to move out of it. So I started looking for something else, and then I moved to Sapient. And at Sapient, it's just not the testing tools and testing that these guys do, right?
Yeah.
In Sapient, the performance shared services team is one step ahead of other service-based companies, where you really get into the monitoring of it, and the log analysis of this, and all the load modeling and a bunch of other stuff. And that's where I started getting into all of this, where we started understanding the performance engineering aspects of it, which is just that's when we realize it's just not test writing scripts and then doing test executions.
There's
It's
a
way
lot more
beyond
to
that.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's how I got into this performance engineering.
So it was maybe we can say it was more of by chance than by choice, right?
Yes, it's purely by chance, if you ask me,
Yeah.
and anything that happened after that was purely by choice.
Hmm.
I
Yeah.
mean, I could have continued doing just the scripting and test execution for 6 years,
Exactly.
but I opted not to.
So
So
anything particular that created your interest more in performance?
So for me, at least when there was this QA and then the dev, the kind of differences that people started talking about, we realized that okay, fine. So normal QA again, when testing means navigating through the website and then clicking on buttons, right?
hmm.
That's what we thought.
Hmm.
But when it came to performance testing, we started talking to other seniors in the teams and then asking them what is so special about performance testing. So and then they started explaining us, this is what you do. You're just not going to click on buttons, right? You're going to do a bunch of stuff. You're going to understand the complete application and infrastructure and a lot of other stuff, where basically you will be creating a production like scenario on your website and giving heads up to your project, to your development team, saying that guys, you have developed a code and this is how it's going to behave in production.
Hmm.
It is all that definitely triggers a lot of interest, because you're contributing a lot to the end user experience there.
Yes. Looking back, what do you think? Performance should be grouped under QA, or do you think it should be a part of infra?
So performance is not a vertical, if you ask me, it's a horizontal,
Mm-hmm.
right? Performance can definitely not be treated as a vertical at any given point of time, because while doing performance testing or performance engineering, I would say, you cannot call it performance testing anymore. It's all performance engineering, because you're
Mm-hmm.
not writing scripts and doing test executions, right? While you're part of performance engineering, it's just not you're testing the functionality of it, right? You're testing a lot other aspects where you're involved, starting from capacity planning of your infrastructure, where you give your recommendations to the teams saying that you are provisioning a specific set of resources on your application, but do you really need so much, or
Yeah.
do you need more than that, right? So your work is starting way before the application functionality is even being developed.
Yes.
So I would say this is not a QA kind of thing. I would say this is like a flavor of QA
Mm-hmm.
plus infrastructure of it. I wouldn't even say infrastructure of it. I would say capacity planning would be the right word to use here, rather than infrastructure.
Yeah. We all have to face situations where we have to describe what we do as part of our job, right? So how do you describe what you do to, let's say, a non-tech relative?
Great question. This is what I train myself every now and then, as we come across these people almost every day, right?
Yeah.
Going back to the 2007, right? So I told my dad first time that I started working for this big insurance client in
Mhm.
Wipro, and my dad would ask me, "What's your job?" And then I tell my dad, I in fact I had to explain this to him again and again in the last for 5 years, what exactly I did. And e-commerce and online shopping and online services have taken an extreme spike in the usage during these early years of like 2010, 2007,
Yeah.
8, 9. And the best example that you can give to any government employee, right? Or anyone who is like just above mid age would be
Mm.
IRCTC,
Yeah.
because people know what IRCTC is,
Mm.
right? And people know how bad the website was sometime back. Everyone know about it. And all I tell my dad was, when you try to book a ticket, it fails at any step of a user journey. And then he told me, yes, this happens quite a lot of time with me. And why is this happening? And then I had explained him how the number of users who's starting to use the website is impacting the site performance. Just like on a simple two-wheeler, how the bike would struggle to pull 4 people at once rather than 2 people at once, right? I really can't get into too many tech details. So I would tell him that, how I simulate what actually happens in production and identified this much early. And dad would then ask me, if you're actually doing this job, why don't you do this for IRCTC? And then I would tell him that I do not have an answer for that. It should be the railway ministry who should answer this. Just taking the real life examples of what really happens in production, right? On the daily usage of websites and that's how I try to explain to them. And in fact, the same thing, not just to the normal people outside software organizations, but also happens a lot with project managers, right?
Yeah.
They do not have complete understanding of performance testing. They know QA because they know the functionality has to work. So they know QA, but they don't know about performance testing, right? So they'd really come and ask us, can you create like 10 scripts in a day? All you do is just record and replay.
Record and replay.
Right? Well, a lot of performance engineers take this as an offense. I really would not take this as an offense, right? I would take this as a responsibility to educate these people and tell them what it takes to build everything as robust as a reusable script, I would say, or a reusable monitoring solution, right? Or a reusable RCA document that can be used anytime if there's an issue that is identified.
So the analogy was really nice. Bike not being able to pull 4 people.
Yeah, and many people can easily relate to that IRCTC example.
Exactly.
Yes.
Ganesh, what according to you would be your best and worst performance projects in your career?
Let's talk about the bad thing first, right, before we talk about the good. So I would say, rather than worst performance project, I would say which is the toughest one to deal with. There is this e-commerce company that's headquartered in North California. I worked for 1 full year for this project. They had downtimes for around like 3 years in a row during the Thanksgiving sale season, right? And the reason why I consider this as the very toughest project that I dealt with was the workload modeling and capacity planning that needed quite a lot of investigation on the user behavior. It was built on a platform called as Blue Martini. All you know about Blue Martini now is probably a cocktail or a lounge in Mumbai, right? But Blue Martini is actually an e-commerce framework, which I've heard for the very first time when I got to this project. Right? Our testing would happen directly on production. So we literally took a downtime on production before sales season, 1 month before sales season, and then we simulate our production loads on production, right? And it's entirely a new tool for us to learn. We were working on Soasta Cloud Test, right? We would stay late in the night, go to the office at 10 p.m., work till 2 a.m. And the senior vice president of the company would come sit next to me asking why there is a spike in the response times from 1.2 seconds to 1.4 seconds, right? I had to explain him why there is this 200 milliseconds gap. So again, there are other companies, a lot of other companies working on just the monitoring and log analysis, right? And every day is a tough day for us because of all the stakeholder management that we had to do, and working on a completely new tool, working late nights, and having to work with Akamai, right? And that was one of the key things that we did for this project, where we did cache priming of all the content on the Akamai edge servers as one of the performance improvements that we did, right? While I say it's a toughest project, I learned a lot about what are the inputs that we need for capacity planning, cache priming, proper production type of workload modeling with exact conversion funnels, abandonment rates, and tough days. But we finally were able to achieve it, 100% uptime during the sales season.
Wow. This was when you were with Sapient, right?
This is when I was with Sapient. I believe it's in 2013 or 2014, sometime then. Yeah, and the best one that I loved is the one recently that we did at ZestMoney. I had very good experiences at both Wipro and Sapient, but then the best one I would say is one thing that I never wanted to leave was performance engineering. Even I started taking care of DevOps and information security here, right? And suddenly there was a requirement, because our website is hosted only in India. We have like around 1,500 to 2,000 concurrent customers at any point of time, and we are integrated with like 3,000 merchants. Our website by itself would take a bit of load, but not a lot coming from a single merchant, right? Integrating with one of the partners in Bangalore. And while we do that, the partner asked us if our system is scalable up to 50 transactions per second. That's like 50 applications completely getting processed and just being processed completely. So the customer getting a successful response of 50 applications per second, which is really big for us. And we can't spend money on a tool, so we had to go completely open source. We can't get tools like Loadrunner or something just for this testing, right? So we went completely open source. We used JMeter for testing purpose, and then we used a master slave setup there. And for log analysis, and again for looking at the results, because we wanted to do live monitoring of all the tests, which JMeter is not really good at. We had to use our log analysis tool. Basically, we integrated our log analysis tool to pull logs from the JTL files, and then show it on the screen so that everyone would take a look at that one. We built all the scripts with all the conversion funnels and everything. A lot of improvements from the application side as well. And we did not achieve 50 TPS, but we achieved 60 TPS.
Oh.
And it was 100% uptime during the sales season. So I really love this project because this was a direct impact on the customers who are trying to buy a product on this super famous e-commerce website and opting for an EMI from ZestMoney.
Quite a lot of learning on working directly on the production, right?
Absolutely, yeah.
I have one more question, Ganesh. Whenever you get into a project, from your past experience, what would you look for, quick wins? Like, would you, as soon as you get into the project, would you look for certain performance bugs that were very obvious?
Yes, absolutely. So there are these few hacks that we can talk about here, right? If it's a proper content-based website, just go for a UI testing first, right?
Yeah.
Do not run into any conclusion on the application performance even before doing a UI test. It can very well be just this one resource sitting on the home page, causing a lot of latency, or developers at times can get little cranky, and then they do not care about the resolution of the image, and then no reactive design. So they just put the complete image there, right? The front end engineers. And if that happens, it could just be that one image that is causing your performance a degradation, which you will not know unless you go back and then see the web page diagnostics on your Loadrunner report, right? So just do a basic UI testing on the front end, which gives quite a bit of performance improvements that are like literally evident on your screen that you can directly report. And again, page level performance testing is considered only as an additional aspect now, right? Because in the world of microservices, where microservices are deployed on containers and Kubernetes pods, it's the API performance and scalability that stands at the top of the list. So for example, for Java based applications, if you really ask me, you can go and then look for, identify a performance bug through just by looking at, if your API performance is bad, you can literally go and then look for hotspots on a good APM tool, which is pretty evident, and analyzing the GC metrics, like the duration that it is taking for every GC, the count of GCs, that would give you a very easy way of identifying any bug, right? And at the same time, even before getting into the Java applications, garbage collection analysis and all of this, do not plan an average load test or anything further without doing a benchmark test. Most of the performance engineers are found to do average load tests because that's as part of their workload model, or that's part of the requirement that you get from the project, right? Most of the performance bugs are found in benchmark tests itself. If an API is not at an SLA with way lesser load than average load, there is no point in jumping into the next level of test.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. Do a benchmark test. Do a 2-user load test, or do a 5-user load test. That's all. And if the numbers are not within that SLA, then there's no point in going beyond, right? And in fact, I have architects coming and asking me, why am I reporting bugs from a 5-user load test and not going for my 150 users average load test, right? So there is quite a bit of a valid reasons that you can give, saying that if your application is not performing well, and here are the hotspots on your API performance, I can show that you can show on an APM tool like Dynatrace or New Relic. There is they would never ask you to go ahead and then do an average load test if they cannot see results at a 5-user load test, right? So these are all quick things that can be done even before jumping into the complete load test cycle. And it just makes your life easier.
Exactly.
So Ganesh, how did you transition into DevOps?
Oh, that's an interesting question, I would say. All I was doing was the performance testing part of it when I was in Wipro, and then I started doing a little bit of PE side of it, which included monitoring log analysis workload profiling and all of this at Sapient. But after a few days at Sapient, there was a requirement that has come up. It's not a requirement, I would say. I would say it's basically we are trying to improve the overall process, right? So we started installing our tools and everything on cloud. And, earlier we had like this standalone machine sitting in our data center, and then we were using them. And then people were asking us, whoa, we have to access only this instance to do our tests, right? And again, the developers and project teams are a way lot dependent on us, on the performance testing team. And project teams would keep complaining that, guys, you don't have enough bandwidth even if we ask you to do a benchmark testing, right? And this test is for just like, testing our individual microservice of 2 APIs with 5 users, and we still have to wait for you guys to give us a bandwidth. So we wanted to avoid all of these instances and then make developers' life easier. And that's when we started trying to automate the overall solution for like basic simple testing. If they really wanted to do, they really don't have to come to us. So we started installing our tools on cloud, and then giving access to them, and also educating them, saying that run this simple command for you to execute your performance test, right? So a little bit of automation there, where we were writing some shell scripts, some Python scripts, and then handing it to the developers. So we started provisioning some infrastructure and then giving like a self-service thing to the developers so that they can do the test by themselves. And that's when my interest started in cloud, right? And once this was done, I came through this opportunity of working with the startup with ZestMoney. And honestly, I was recruited to be a part of a performance engineering team, wherein I automate a lot of stuff and also contribute towards the applications performance improvement and microservice performance improvement, right? But once I joined here, because of my interest that I got with cloud, I started working with the DevOps team, and I ended up actually leading the team now. And now, that's how I came into DevOps, and then that's how I got in touch with DevOps, and I'm completely into DevOps right now.
So, how would you describe DevOps? Is it like the automation part? Like most people have a hard time, even myself. When I look up the definition of DevOps, there is a separate definition. People use DevOps in many different contexts, right? So, how would you define DevOps, Ganesh?
First of all, people need to come out of the view that DevOps is not a team, right? It's not a team, it's a culture. It's a culture that's promoted by a specific team, wherein automation is done at every possible point of code, from the developer's laptop to the end user's platform, right? No compromise in quality or responsiveness, or possibly increasing the value day by day. Right? So DevOps is a culture. It's not, and it is just promoted by a team called as a DevOps team. But as such, DevOps by itself is not a team.
Yeah.
So this culture has to be there all the way, starting from idea to market, that comes from a product team or a project management team, till the customer delight. It goes all the way till what is the kind of experience the customer is having. DevOps is across every single track of this, right? And once automated, people may ask, why do we need DevOps? Because everything is automated, right?
Yeah.
So you said, so we are telling that, okay, DevOps is required to automate every single possible point in the overall code journey and all of this. In fact, one person asked me, like, I know you guys will have all these Java pipelines and so Jenkins pipelines and everything. You have all of this, which is good, but you have automated everything. But why do we need you now? Right? So my answer would be, do you really not need a service center after you buy an expensive vehicle? You bought an expensive vehicle, right? But you still need to get it serviced every now and then. You may want to get an upgrade, right? Or you may want to get it serviced, or you need some kind of maintenance to be done on your expensive vehicle that you bought. I would say the overall DevOps process that you have is an expensive vehicle, right? Not in terms of cost, but in terms of the quality that you're getting out of it. And you have to maintain it every now and then, and you have to improvise the process. So you need DevOps team. And the best part of DevOps is it promotes a lot of open source, and it bridges the gap between your different teams, the infra team, dev team, and QA team. DevOps means development plus ops is what people say. We may not actually be doing the development work, but the DevOps would still oversee the code releases and should have a basic knowledge of a programming language and should understand what's the overall process, right? So I would say DevOps is not just a team, it's a culture that that should be built across multiple teams.
Exactly. Yeah, I have seen this happen across many companies. The team that maintains the infrastructure, they are referred to as the DevOps team. But as you said, it's a culture, and it
Yep.
involves automating stuff. And ultimately, the customer delight is the goal of DevOps.
Yep, absolutely.
Ganesh, how do you see performance integrating with the DevOps culture?
Performance is not going to be like the performance testing or just just giving results on how an application is performing, right? So you are going to make sure that performance testing is part of, so just like as you see in the DevOps overall cycle, test is part of it. Test is part of the overall DevOps cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
So in an SDLC, if you look at the DevOps, the fancy infinite symbol that was created by someone, you see test also as one of the blocks.
Yeah.
If you're talking about performance testing would fall under that, right? And if you're talking about performance engineering, which involves monitoring, analysis, log analysis, that would fall under the ops part of it, right? So performance testing is always also an integral part of DevOps. It's just that in big service-based companies, they treat this as a separate track because of the magnitude of work that they have. But if you start thinking about from a startup culture, you have people. We are talking about people who are, polyglot, who are like full stack developers, like full stack engineers, right?
Right.
So they do everything and anything, starting from UI, be it Java programming or C# or Go or Node.js, testing for that matter. They build Selenium test suites, right? So the testing is always an integral part of DevOps, and performance testing being one kind of a QA still falls under DevOps as on today. And the monitoring and analysis would fall under the ops part of the overall DevOps cycle. And the very important, I would say, the prominent part of performance engineering, which is way before testing, which includes the capacity planning and infrastructure planning, would come under the planning part of DevOps, right? Like I mentioned, because DevOps is a culture starting from the planning of the feature that needs to go to the production till the feature actually reaches the customer's fingertips, DevOps is there everywhere. And performance testing also, probably because it's very close to my heart, I'm saying this, performance testing also falls in every single block, starting from capacity planning till assuring about the performance and also continuing with the ops.
I've seen a couple of books on this, the DevOps culture, right? There is a book called The Phoenix Project. And there is a series of books actually, The Phoenix Project, The DevOps Handbook, and Beyond the Phoenix Project, and one more book. So many people have suggested that it's a good read on DevOps. So I think I'll pick one of those and start reading after, you describing the process.
Yeah.
Okay, I have another question, Ganesh. So
Sure.
how do you think the role of a performance engineer will evolve in future? For example, there is the SRE track, and there is some people are now referring to QA roles as SDET engineers, and there is the DevOps side of it. So how do you think, or which one would be ideal for a performance engineer going forward?
Like you correctly mentioned, it's not a performance tester anymore, right? It's always a performance engineer. And performance tester is only till you cross a certain years of experience in your overall career. After like probably 1 or 2 years, you cannot be called as a performance QA engineer, right? You're a performance engineer. So take like few references from big people like Satya Nadella's last year MS Ignite session. People are talking about tech intensity, accelerated innovation. Like these are the things that people are talking about. No one wants to repeat the same task again and again manually.
Exactly.
Be it performance testing or any other track, right? A performance tester should become an engineer more than testing, and adding the performance work would expose him more into infra and cloud verticals. Right? And performance engineers in any company during the first few years would be like a T-shaped, I would say. T-shaped skill is what I would say about them. The T-shape would be domain and performance tracks of it, right? And this should become a pie-shaped one and should continue to become a comb-shaped skill set. Right? I saw about this in one of the DevOps summits that I attended, where it was very beautifully explained, saying that a T-shaped the skill set of a person should grow as per the years of experience that grows along with for the person, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the first few years he can be T-shaped, but after that he has to become pie-shaped after some time, and
Mm-hmm.
towards probably a decade of his career he should be comb-shaped. He cannot be pie-shaped or T-shaped anymore,
Pi in the
right?
sense pi r square, right? That.
uh, Yes, that pi. Yes, pi
Okay.
r square pi. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and then it should be like a comb shape, right? So, for example, if you want me to give a quick example of this one,
Mm-hmm.
in Sapient or in Wipro where we worked, I
Mm-hmm.
was working with a bank, right? I
Mm-hmm.
was working with this big bank in South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
I was sitting in South Africa and then working for this, and all we did was performance testing for some time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would say. And I had abundant knowledge on banking and financial services there.
Mm-hmm.
If I consider banking knowledge as the horizontal line in the T, my performance testing was the vertical line,
Vertical line.
right?
Mm-hmm.
While that was good for around 6 months, people started asking me, why only this? Can you also do this one? And they would expect me to do something more, because I moved from an engineer role to a lead role, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then I have to move myself from T-shaped to pie-shaped, where I also had to add the complete monitoring aspect of it. I
Mm-hmm.
have to add mobile testing under that one, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that's a kind of career which is not specific for performance engineers, but for every engineer out there who wants to grow. For me, not because I started dealing with a lot of DevOps stuff, but I somehow look a performance engineer to be grown well into the fields of infrastructure and DevOps there. I definitely see that kind of contribution that's being done by all performance engineers as on today in terms of capacity planning and production workload profiling.
Mm-hmm.
And that would definitely help this person grow in the fields of infrastructure. Maybe not DevOps, but definitely in the infrastructure field of it. And the more automation of all the activities is the only way to go, that I would say. I think, Brunal, you remember the apps framework that we have developed in Sapient, right?
Yes, yes.
And that's exactly what I was trying to refer in the previous questions, where
Mm-hmm.
we are trying to solve the problem where we want the developers not to come to us and still have their application benchmarked well within a pre-prod environment or in probably a smaller environment. And
Mm-hmm.
again, they do not have to pay for the resource, they do not have to pay for the infrastructure, because it's all containerized, right?
Mm-hmm.
All it brings up is a small container, executes the test, and then kills the container. That's pretty quick, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, automating a lot of stuff. And I somehow see a performance engineer can very well grow towards being and into the cloud and infra tracks of it. And DevOps, if he gets a chance to work in DevOps, yes, I think he should.
Okay. I hope that this advice or this suggestion will give some clarity on what direction to take in their careers to our listeners.
Yep, I hope so too.
I had one question regarding career advice for young performance engineers, but I think Ganesh has mostly included that. If you have any additional advice, Ganesh?
Yeah, learn as many tools as you can for the first few years of your career. That's all I can say,
Right.
right? And definitely learn a scripting language that
Mm-hmm.
helps you automate all the stuff that you want to automate.
Mm-hmm.
It is just not the reporting that you're going to do anymore. There is not just scripting and test execution and reporting, but then you're going to do a lot of other stuff. Learn a scripting language that will help you automate your stuff for sure. Go for Python or go for Ruby, go for anything of your choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
Just not
Right.
the application. Try to understand the infrastructure aspects of the hardware holding it.
Mm-hmm.
For the first 5 years, every possible tool you can, just learn it. As you progress in your career, the business or the project teams would look at you not to just come do the test executions, but to improve the process that's already there.
Yeah.
I would say move towards open source, contribute to the business wins, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as an engineer, that will help you experiment a lot of stuff and understand what a workload model is. And there are always requests from projects to, the project would just come and tell you 10 users is testing start karte hain, and then let us see where we'll go, right?
Yeah.
That's not how it works. You need to understand the application first, and for that you need to have an understanding on analytics, right? For example, Google Analytics, Omniture, Web Analytics, the ones that we're talking about, right? Think about learning as many tools as you can in the first few years of your career. And one advice that I would give to performance engineers is always one thing to remember, because performance engineering is something that is the smallest team in the project. You need to have the confidence when you talk about performance engineering with anyone. Consider yourself the one who knows more than anyone else in the room.
Exactly.
When you speak about performance engineering, that's
Yeah.
the only way to go and then gain trust from people.
I mean, this will come on the soft skill side of it. So this is very much required. Most, since the performance teams are small ones, usually the engineers, they're not confident when they talk to architects or managers or something. So this is what performance engineers need to develop.
I think that's enough advice for the young performance engineers.
So Ganesh, this was a really great chat. Even though we have seen in the industry through years, we got a lot of insight from your experience. Thank you so much for coming onto the show, talking to us about your experience and giving guidance to the listeners.
Thank you so much, Murad and Nitesh, for having me. It was a pleasure talking to you guys.
I didn't realize how fast the time passed. I mean, the conversation was really insightful and I lost track of time.
Yes, Mrinal, we should have definitely more interviews.
Sure, Nitish. So this brings us to our next section, What the Crash.
In this week's What the Crash, I have two website crashes. First one is Fix Your Bike website crashed as scheme launches in England. A government website offering £50 bike repair vouchers in England crashed after the government scheme launched on Tuesday. As a result, many people complained they received an error message when they tried to access the website.
Yeah, so this scheme was introduced by the UK government to encourage people to use bicycles more. So this is government's strategy to fight obesity because there is a growing evidence of a link between obesity and increased risk from COVID.
In the second item, the website to apply for Melbourne's worker permit crashed just hours before it became essential to carry it after curfew.
This news is almost like the ones that we saw in the earlier episodes, right?
Right.
Website crashes happening because of COVID. So coronavirus is literally wreaking havoc in the physical and digital worlds.
Yeah.
So that brings us to the end of this episode. I hope our listeners liked it. Please share it with your friends and encourage them to subscribe.
Yes. Whenever someone subscribes, somewhere in a production environment, a performance issue gets fixed automatically. So go ahead and subscribe. Until next time.
Bye, listeners. Catch you in the next one.